Welcome to the chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 185 of Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Shane Haff, and you can follow me on Twitter at ShaneHaffNFL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've heard him on the Tough Cover radio show. It is Mark Henry Jr. Give him a follow on Twitter at MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how are you doing tonight?
Doing well. This is where we'll talk about it, but the exact outcome I wanted for the Eagles in terms of opponent and how everything shaped up, I am extremely happy.
Yeah, we are recording during the fourth quarter of the Rams-Vikings game with the Rams blowing out the Vikings. Wanted to get this show after Monday Night Football. So, in a normal week, we just ignore Monday Night Football. But here it's 1/6 of the wildcard games, and it determined a quarter of the divisional round matchup. So it's a lot bigger deal. So coming to you guys late tonight, although not as late as maybe we anticipated when we thought this could be a good game. But we'll save that one for the end. We may be able to give you a final score by the time we get there, as Sam Darnold almost throws another interception. But let's start with the Saturday games. And let's jump into, we'll just take them in order this week. The Los Angeles Chargers traveling to the Houston Texans, and they lose that game 32-12. It was a 12-6 game at halftime, and the Texans just dominated the second half. Justin Herbert threw 3 interceptions in the second half. He finished the day 14 of 32 for 242 yards, a touchdown, 4 picks, and 4 sacks. That's after he threw 3 interceptions in the entire regular season. For Herbert, I thought he started the game well and was let down by his receivers. Then he just totally imploded down the stretch in this game. And just to go along with the Texans' dominance in this game, Joe Mixon had 6 carries for 15 yards in the first half. And then he had 19 carries for 91 yards in the second half as Houston just pounded the ball. They got out of this game. The Chargers got the ball via turnover twice in Houston territory in their first 4 possessions, and they got a field goal and a turnover. So didn't score off of turnovers. Herbert was pressured on 53% of his dropbacks. He was 3 of 15 when under pressure in this game. Just total implosion from the Chargers. And I mean, to go alongside that, I don't want to dismiss the Texans defense because the Texans defense was really good. They're going to be put to the test next week against the Chiefs. But what were your thoughts on the Chargers and the Texans?
Yeah, I think the Chargers are the story from the game. And I mean, we could talk about the Texans when we get to the preview. And just to be quite honest about it, I don't really walk out of the game feeling any differently about the Texans than I felt when I walked in. Like, I don't think they're a good football team. I am just shocked by the way the Chargers turtled, and they totally chargered the game away in a way that we've seen under every head coaching regime in the Chargers era, whether it be Phillip Rivers or Justin Herbert even. But I actually kind of find myself defending Justin Herbert online, which is a funny place for me to be. I think I have been proven right beyond the shadow of a doubt that he never belonged in that top tier with Mahomes, obviously, and more so with Josh and Lamar and Burrow. And to the people who said he was light years ahead of Jalen Hurts, I think they've been proven officially wrong. But now is where the other extreme is happening, where now there's the people hating on Justin Herbert saying like, oh, well, he's not as good as Jared Goff or Baker Mayfield or certain names where I hear and I'm like, I don't know. If you swapped Justin Herbert with some of those situations, I think we're singing a different tune about Justin Herbert or the quarterback you swap him with. So is he, that top-notch elite, top 5, top 4 quarterback who I think a lot of the nerds sold him to be? Absolutely not. Is he a guy who I think you can maybe now question whether or not he's just one of those guys who's a bit of a loser, who when the lights get bright, he kind of, shrinks a little bit? Yeah, I think it's fair to ask, is he not a top 10, top 12 quarterback? No, he absolutely is. He's still a top 10 to 12 quarterback, somewhere in that 8 to 12 range, probably. So I just think, we get into these extremes, especially at the quarterback position, where someone's either the best or top 5 or they stink. But in reality, there's 32 quarterbacks, so there's going to be guys ranked in between 5 to 12, and that's going to kind of fluctuate based on how their teams look around them usually. And I think it'd be disingenuous of me to yell and scream about this game or yell and scream about Justin Herbert being a total loser when I thought this Chargers team was going to win like 5 games this year. They revamped the roster. They really don't have a lot of weapons around him or a lot of talent in general around him on the offensive side of the ball. And I thought what he did this year was pretty incredible. So, yeah, rough game, rough night if you're a Chargers fan. I know that even though they don't really exist, but rough night for the Herbert people. I think he's just fine, and he's going to be just fine.
Yeah, I tweeted during that game. I had a tweet go kind of crazy, and I found out later it got posted on the NFL Reddit, and the Cowboys Reddit, because I had a lot of Cowboys fans coming at me on Twitter. But I said Herbert is headed into Dak territory for me. Incredibly talented quarterback, but at some point you have to win in the postseason, or what's the point? And that's kind of where I'm at. And I've been a big Justin Herbert defender. And I've been a pretty big Dak defender for a lot of years. And at the end of the day, they're both incredibly talented. If you don't win in the playoffs, it doesn't matter. And it's a fine line to walk between like QB wins and you have to be able to win in the playoffs. But and Herbert's, I think he's only like 26. So the book is not written on his career. But at this point, like if the Chargers are 13-4 going into Wildcard Weekend next year, playing an 11-win team, I'm going to have in the back of my head, like the Chargers are probably going to choke again.
Yeah, absolutely. And this isn't the whole, you have to be able to win in the playoffs. Me and Shane, you won't hear us say that about Lamar, and you won't hear us say that about Josh Allen.
I got pushback on that about Lamar too. And I was like, he was literally in a conference championship game last year. Like,
yeah,
I mean,
I'm not asking guys to go and win a Super Bowl before I give them credit, but get a playoff win when you're favored twice now. That's 2 playoff losses where Herbert and the Chargers have been favored now. Obviously, this game where they get pummeled by, in my opinion, a pretty bad Texans team. And last time where they gave up a 27-0 lead to not a great Jags team. So I do think at a certain point, you're a loser until you're not, but that doesn't mean, like he's worse than Geno Smith or something. Like I've seen some crazy takes out there on Twitter. So Justin Herbert's going to be just fine.
Yeah. I have a comment here from Daniel saying Herbert's taking that Kirk Cousins trajectory, and I wish him the best in pursuit of the bag. He did get the bag already, so he's way better than Kirk Cousins, though.
Yeah, and they're going to go out and spend money, and they're going to go out. They have a ton of cap space. I think they're going to be right there as one of the contenders in the AFC next year. I think they're going to win a lot of games, but like you said, when they get to the playoffs, we'll probably be pretty nervous.
Yeah, at the end of the day, it was a bit of a rebuilding year for the Chargers. Maybe it's step one. We'll see where they go next year. And Texans fans, don't tune out. We'll talk about you a little more when we get to the preview section. But let's move on to the other Saturday game. You had Pittsburgh at Baltimore, and Baltimore wins 28-14, but this game was over at halftime. Ravens scored touchdown, not dissimilar to this Monday night game, by the way. The Ravens just dominated, scored touchdowns on 3 of their first 4 drives. They outgained the Steelers 304-49 in the first half. And the Steelers just had no answer for the Ravens rushing attack, which went off 299 yards on 50 carries. The Ravens' third possession was a 13-play, 85-yard touchdown drive in which there were 0 pass plays. The Steelers just got whooped in the trenches. And the Steelers entered the playoffs on a 4-game losing streak. And it showed that the offense was a disaster. The defense couldn't stop anybody. Lamar and Derrick Henry combined for 267 rushing yards in this game, which is the second most by a quarterback running back duo in the NFL. Mark, do you want to take a guess at who is in first place with 300 yards?
I'm done with the guesses. I embarrass myself weekly.
All right, it's Colin Kaepernick and Frank Gore in 2012.
Never, not a chance that I would have gotten that.
Oh, I wish you would have guessed now so we could have seen who you came up with. But
who knows? RG3 and Alfred Morris. I feel like I guess RG3 every week.
Yeah.
Ask me something like that.
I'm going to start having to preface it with it's not RG3.
Yeah.
But what were your thoughts on the Ravens and Steelers game?
Again, I think it's probably more important to focus on the loser because we'll talk about the game of the year with Baltimore-Buffalo. And an interesting subplot that with the All-Pro first team and what that might mean for the MVP. We'll get to that. But in terms of Pittsburgh, I think you can make a case this is Mike Tomlin's worst coaching job of his career, because I actually think you can make a case that this is a Steelers team that could have won 12 plus games and maybe even giving themselves a little bit of an easier path to winning a playoff game. Am I telling you that this team could have went out and competed with Kansas City and Buffalo and Baltimore? No. And that's kind of was my point all year on Pittsburgh. I feel like I was so right on Pittsburgh for 100% of this season. In the preseason, I picked Pittsburgh to go over their win total and make the playoffs, and that was my favorite bet of the preseason. People told me I was crazy. They weren't going to make the playoffs over Cincy and Cleveland and Baltimore, and they start 9-2 or 10-2 or whatever that was that they started, and then obviously they fully collapsed down the stretch. And right when they beat the Steelers by 2 points, they won 18-16, and the Ravens missed 3 kicks in that game, and they had 3 fumbles in that game. I came out and said that was completely bogus. Everybody's going to buy that. People started talking about them as a Super Bowl contender. Bill Simmons went out and said they were the best team in the AFC in December after that win. And I absolutely, it was so easy to tell that this was going to be a collapse when you saw that they played the Chiefs, Ravens, and the Eagles 3 games in 11 days. And I think similar to last year when the Eagles had that gauntlet down the stretch where it was Chiefs and Bills and Niners and Cowboys and someone I'm forgetting, and then another Cowboys game. And I think the Eagles ran out of gas getting up week in and week out for those big games. I think that happened to the Steelers as well. But and part of why I think it's the worst Tomlin job, it feels like this team fell apart in the locker room. George Pickens, and obviously he's a hard to control guy.
George Pickens is a nutcase.
He's an absolute weirdo, but he wasn't doing this kind of stuff in the media for the last 2 years before this. And obviously that's out of the bag now. The whole, I think that the whole Fields Russ thing was a disaster. I think Fields should have been the starting quarterback all year long. I think it's insane that they never even gave him a chance at any point as Russ was totally collapsing down the stretch. And I also think there was I don't know how much you've seen of this, but there were all these quotes from defensive guys about one guy not knowing the plays and not knowing, like, they were basically like accusing someone of going rogue, and there's all these Steelers bloggers trying to figure out who it is, and they think it's Minka. I think they're all mad at Minka for him doing his own thing. I don't know if that's confirmed or not. There was also some rumors it could have been about Queen, but even like the defense, which Tomlin always kind of has buttoned up, even if he's not the DC or the play calling defensive guy, they seem to fall apart and were pointing the finger at each other in the media when things went wrong. And this year wasn't just they didn't have a quarterback. The defense fell apart over the last 2 months of the year. I'm usually a pretty pro Tomlin guy. I do think that there's some similarities to the end of Andy Reid in Philadelphia. I think it's probably time.
I think Mike Tomlin's still a good coach. I think he can go somewhere else and be a good coach, but it would be mutually beneficial if they moved on. It doesn't sound like they're going to, but I think at a certain point, it's just time. And just like you mentioned with the Andy Reid example, I think it's time for Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. And that's not an indictment of Tomlin. I think he would probably go somewhere and be good. He would get hired immediately and he would be good. Eventually, the messaging wears thin. You just need a reset. And I think that's where they're at, but they're not going to do it, at least not this season.
Maybe if Dallas comes calling with maybe a first-round pick.
I would absolutely not like to see Mike Tomlin in Dallas.
I would like it if they traded a high draft pick for it.
Okay, that I could be fine with that.
I don't think he's worth trading. Like, I think there's very few coaches. We kind of clowned Sean Payton and the Broncos when they traded for Sean Payton. I don't remember what they gave up for him. But I remember saying on this podcast, I was like, well, I do think Sean Payton's like a top 3 coach in the world. So at least if they traded for it, at least they got someone who I think can make a difference. But yeah, I don't think Tomlin would be worth giving up even like a 3rd round pick for, to be honest. But he obviously would be a good hire.
They sent a 2023 first round pick and a 2024 second round pick in exchange for Sean Payton and a 2024 third rounder.
They swapped a second and a third. So yeah, so they really gave up a first.
Yeah.
And then the difference from a third to a second. But that's pretty crazy. I didn't know it was a first, honestly.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, let's keep rolling here. Let's get into Denver at Buffalo, another not good game. So we're 3 for 3 with bad games. We'll get to some of the good games here in a minute. But Buffalo wins 31-7. Denver opened the game with a 5-play, 70-yard touchdown drive, and they never scored again. And the Bills' run game was on point. I felt like that was the theme early. Well, it's really all throughout Wildcard Weekend. James Cook rushed for 120 yards and a touchdown. Overall, the Bills put up 210 on the ground. Josh Allen was 20 of 26 for 272 yards and 2 touchdowns through the air, and the Bills held the ball for almost 42 minutes in this game. And again, we can give a little more of a referendum on the losers. That's kind of what we've slipped into here. But for Denver, this is a good season. Bo Nix looked far better than I expected. Like, I thought that was a horrible pick in the draft. And he looked far better than I expected. I'm still not necessarily sold on him as a franchise guy, but if Sean Payton believes in him, and after what we've seen this year, I think I do as well. At the end of the day, there's just a huge talent gap between them and like the Bills, Chiefs, Ravens of the world. And so they're going to have to spend another offseason or two. I don't know what their cap looks like, but they're going to have to go, put pieces around him and try to make a push. I think they're still light years away roster wise, but we have seen how quickly it can come together if you hit on the quarterback. And I'm not like dead convinced he's a franchise guy, but I feel a lot better about him than I did in the draft.
So we've talked about Ashton Jeanty landing spots before. And this is pretty deep in the draft. Denver sitting at 20, Chargers sitting at 23. Don't both of those teams make a ton of sense as teams that maybe could trade up for a Jeanty? And I know we don't love taking running backs in the first round. If you're a team like Denver or a team like the Chargers that made the playoffs this year, you're a young team, you have some money to spend at the important positions, maybe that's kind of the exact team that should be making a move up in the draft and trading like a second for Jeanty to move up instead of a team like, the Raiders taking Jeanty at 6 or the Saints or the Bears taking Jeanty at 10. I don't know why that popped in my head. I was thinking about that.
That would be the most Saints move of all time. We're just a running back away. Let's trade up and.
But I was thinking about that today, thinking, man, Denver and the Chargers did this really without a competent running game this season. And the Chargers are a little different. I don't think the Chargers make as much sense because Dobbins is good when he's good, but I don't know how much you can depend on Dobbins year to year health-wise, and I don't know if they will be. I'm sure he's a free agent. I think it was a 1-year deal. So I'd be curious if Dobbins gets paid. It's a tricky situation. I don't know if you're a team out there that you really can commit real resources to Dobbins just because of his health situation. So I wonder if he's there next year. But Jeanty, it seems like he makes a ton of sense for both of those teams. And Denver, I'm pretty sure, has a ton of money now that they ate the big cap hit for Russ.
Yeah. J.K. Dobbins was on like a 1-year, $1.6 million deal. So
Yeah.
I can't imagine he's going to get paid much in free agency, to be honest.
He'll get a little something, I think. He'll get like a $5-6 million deal, probably for like 1 year.
Yeah.
Just as like a prove it deal. But yeah, the Denver's done that. But really, you're looking at the Chargers had Dobbins when he was good. Denver's had a terrible running game all season long. Hasn't mattered if it's Javonte, if it's Estime, if it's Jaleel McLaughlin. None of those guys are full-time workhorse backs. Estime's probably got the best chance of it, and he probably got the least chance at it this season to be that. So I do think if you brought a bell cow running back in there, you paid a receiver or drafted a receiver to go next to Sutton. The O-line's rock solid there in Denver. I think they actually got graded out as the best O-line of the NFL this year on multiple different sites. And so you imagine you put a running back behind there, you grab another receiver. The defense is obviously stellar. Who has the better next 3 to 5 years, the Chargers or the Broncos?
I would say the Chargers because I believe in Justin Herbert a lot more than I believe in Bo Nix. I think they've got an advantage at quarterback. The Broncos have a slight advantage at coach, but I think Harbaugh is a good coach. And the Chargers need weapons, but they have invested in the offensive line, and that's generally a good investment. So I would say the Chargers. I think the Chargers have the better run over the next few years than the Broncos.
I'm interested. I wonder how old's Pat Surtain?
He's not very old. He came out in the same draft Devontae Smith did.
24. Yeah, that's an interesting debate. If you're gonna take Denver, it's probably a lot because of him. I think it's up in the air. I think they'll probably be neck and neck for who is going to give Kansas City kind of the most trouble in that division. And I know a lot of people are just going to write Kansas City year in and year out in pen as the winner of that division. They did only win 11 games last year, Kansas City. This year, obviously, they went 15-1 and then lost the last game. But they have had years in the past where they haven't been, a rolling ball of chainsaws in the regular season. I think the Chargers and Broncos, I'm sure one will probably have a dip next year where they won't be as good as we expect. And then I think the other will probably be competing with the Chiefs to win the division.
Yeah, I feel like the dip comes for the Broncos. It's the whole second-year quarterback, all of that. So that's would be my prediction in January, which is a crazy time to be making predictions about next year. But here we go. So
yeah.
All right, let's roll on to the Eagles game. The Eagles host the Packers and win 22-10. And I mean, a fumble recovery on the opening kickoff is always a good way to start the game. And so the Eagles put up a touchdown off of that. They intercept Jordan Love 3 times on the day after that. I thought that the two main things in this game is, one, the Packers have lived off of turnovers this season. Their defense is ranked low in success rate, but high in EPA. They consistently give up yardage, but then they get turnovers. The Eagles never turned the ball over. And I thought there was a concerted effort to play conservatively. And at times it was to the detriment of the Eagles offense, but they never turned the ball over. And the Packers turned the ball over 4 times. The other big storyline for this game was the Packers left guard, Elton Jenkins, leaves the game early, and it just destroyed the Packers game plan. The Packers planned to slide protection at Jalen Carter all game, and suddenly doing that means they have a backup left guard that's on an island against Milton Williams, and that's a matchup that the Eagles just won. We could also talk about how the fraudulent all-pro team that has the Packers right tackle is all-pro over Lane Johnson. He just got destroyed by Nolan Smith all night. But we don't have to get into that because all-pro and Pro Bowl stuff's a joke, and you know how I feel about NFL awards. But what were your takeaways from the Eagles-Packers game?
My take is that people can't have it both ways. I was obviously really high on Green Bay all year long. The same people who told me how bad Green Bay is can't come back and tell me how bad the Eagles played and what a terrible showing from the Packers. One or the other. Either the Eagles were really good or the Packers were really bad. Like it can't be one of the. To me, I'm becoming the Joker with the online talk after this win. I was incredibly nervous about this game. So
Same.
if you were to tell me that we won by 12 points in a game that the opposing team never had the ball down a touchdown, I would have taken that and paid money for the right for that to be the case. Like the Green Bay Packers lost one game this year by more than 5 points. They lost no games by more than 10 points. And we went out and beat them by 12, and Saquon broke a run at the end of the game that could have made that 19, to be honest. And the only reason that 12 isn't 13 is because Jake Elliott missed an extra point. And the only reason that it's not another 3 is because at the end of the half, you could take a 56-yarder, but because we have no confidence in Jake Elliott, which is like the third or fourth time this year before halftime that we've been in this situation, we go for it on 4th and 4, false start, backs us up, and then we punt. So I am nowhere near as concerned about the offense that other people are. We are now 12-0 in games that Jalen Hurts, Lane Johnson, and A.J. Brown all start and finish while averaging 28.4 points per game in those 12 games. I understand that. Was it the offense's best performance? Absolutely not. But when you get an opening kickoff that's fumbled and you score on it, and then you immediately go up 10-0 right after that, I think it changes the way you call the game. I think this is not a clean comparison. But I'm a Notre Dame fan, obviously. Notre Dame, Georgia. That game, they went up 10-3, and then they got the kick return touchdown to start the second half to go up 17-3. Once that happened, Riley Leonard went like 5 of 7 for like 32 yards for the rest of the game from that point on. And for the whole 2 weeks leading up to Penn State, or however long it was, people talked about how Notre Dame can't throw the ball at all, and how he only threw for 80 yards last week. He's not going to break 150 against this Penn State defense. But then they came out and it's a close game. It's a different game script. He threw for 230 or whatever it was. And was it perfect? No. But he was able to make those plays. I think sometimes people watch a game where a team gets up early, goes into a bit of a conservative shell, and then you point at the box score and you're like, why didn't this team throw for more yards? Why didn't this team do better? And it's like, well, once you're up 10 points, I think it changes the way that you look at the game. It changes the way you call the game. And like you said, I think that there was a clear effort to not turn the ball over, to not give the game away. And how many of these games have we talked about? The turnovers have been a huge part of the conversation. You watch all these other playoff games and you watch turnovers change the game on a dime and completely flip the game or almost end the game in some scenarios. And we don't do that. And something else I was thinking about, sorry for the rant here. Something else I was thinking about, and the defense was fantastic in this game. Yeah. I feel like that's almost getting ignored with how the offense is taking all of the talk. But when did the defense start becoming fantastic?
Like out of the bye. When Cooper DeJean was inserted into the starting lineup out of the bye is when the defense became awesome.
And that's probably the number one reason. I would say a contributing reason, what stopped right around that time? The Jalen Hurts turnovers, right? Remember the first 3-4 weeks, that was a constant conversation based on the end of last season. The turnovers stopped. The offense stopped putting the defense in unfavorable positions. And it probably made the defense do a heck of a lot better. I think that absolutely has an impact on that. So when the defense is never having to deal with bad field position, it feels like it probably helps a lot, especially with the Fangio defense. When everything's in front of you, you drop back, you make them they're not going to make the big play. So you make them make a mistake by having to go 15 plays on a drive. There's more likelihood they get backed up by penalties or turn the ball over. And that's exactly what happened on both counts in this game.
Yeah. Weeks before the bye, the Eagles ranked 29th in EPA per play. After the bye, they ranked first. Before the bye, they ranked 19th in success rate. After the bye, they ranked first. So, yeah, I mean, the defense has been incredible for sure. And I said this on the post-game show. I'll say it here too because, you weren't there and we get different listeners for different shows. But the Eagles missed 14 tackles in this game. It's the highest amount of missed tackles they've had in any game this season. They had they had the worst offensive game plan I've seen since the Bucs playoff game last year. And they beat an 11-win playoff team by 12 points that could have been 19 if Saquon didn't slide down. And this is the same team that played the Vikings to a 2-point loss twice and lost to the Lions by 3-10. And by the way, Jalen Hurts had thrown 4 passes in the last 27 days heading into that game. And so you would like for the offense to look better. At the end of the day, they dominated the Packers from opening kickoff to the end of the game.
This was the game that concerned me, and I know people are going to make fun of me on that. This was the game that worried me, especially with the rust. The first game, the Packers had a little bit of that. That they had previous, playoff success last season going on the road as a wild card. Hopefully, Nick has a comment there that I want to comment on. The difference between Justin Herbert and Jordan Love is that Jordan Love played awesome in the playoffs last year. Jordan Love torched the Dallas Cowboys and then almost beat San Fran, who went toe-to-toe with the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. Justin Herbert's never won a playoff game. I think Jordan Love at least has earned some right for people to be worried when he was awesome in the playoffs last year. It's also only his second year as a starter, whereas Justin Herbert's in his 5th year as a starter. So I do think I do think people are killing Jordan Love a little too much. He did not play well in this game, but I still think Jordan Love is really good. Even in this game, he made a couple really good throws. There was that one throw on 3rd down in a triple coverage, which is probably almost it's probably a problem that he's making that throw, and it's probably why he's having some of those turnover issues this season. But I think more. I didn't walk out of that game feeling like, oh my God, Jordan Love sucked. I walked out of that game being like, oh my God, that defense was nasty. Here's something I want to ask you.
Not to mention also that he was playing it basically by the end of the game without his top 3 receivers. So
and without an O-line.
I think Jordan Love's an incredibly talented player. I think he's always going to be frustrating with Jordan Love might be like Matthew Stafford.
He's a little dollar store Josh Allen-ish.
Yeah, I remember the year that the Rams won the Super Bowl, like we were talking about on one of these shows, I think heading into the divisional round of the playoffs, that Stafford is turning the ball over a lot. And it might cost them a shot to go win a Super Bowl. And then he played clean for 3 games and they won one. But he's got incredible arm talent. When he gets hot, he's nearly unstoppable. And when he gets cold, it can be really bad. And there's a lot of reminiscence, albeit with more mobility, to Matthew Stafford's game, I think. And so I think, Jordan Love's talented. I was on the record that I thought the Packers were the worst first-round matchup for the Eagles, both because they're a really good team that I think Eagles fans undersold, and also just for some schematic things that we don't have to get into here. But the Eagles get out of it with a win, and I'm happy. I'm happy about that. So
the Packers are the youngest team in the NFL. They have a ton of money to go spend. I think they're going to be right here in the mix for a long time. LaFleur's a really good coach. But yeah, they were dominated in this game. And something, obviously, Nakobe Dean goes down in this game. It's the biggest injury news. The one thing I'll say about that is every team's going to have guys go down here in the playoffs. It's the end of the year. Guys are banged up coming in. I feel like you see more injuries in the playoffs than in the regular season. How many, I was trying to rank the valuable Eagles on both sides of the ball. How Nakobe Dean is our what is the number starter? Our what best starter on the defense?
Best or most important?
Either.
Most important. He's behind Jalen Carter, Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean.
I think you could make
Zach Bond, Nolan Smith, especially since Bryce Huff only played 1 snap. And
you can make a case for Sweat. I won't make it, but I think you could make the case.
Yeah. Sweat's a better pass rusher than Smith, but Smith's so much better in the run game. I'd say those 5. I don't put the safeties in there because you've got 2 that I think are solid, and it's the sort of thing like it would suck to lose a safety, but if you did, you've still got another good one, and you can bring it. And I know people hate Avonte Maddox, but yeah, I would say he's like the 5th or 6th most important player on the defense. And it stinks, and I hate it for him, especially because next year is going to be a contract year, and he's going to be coming off of an injury, starting the year on the PUP list. A guy that was, one of the knocks on him was could he stay healthy, and he did it and played fantastic. And it's going to be a tough injury to come back from. So I hate that for him, but I do think the Eagles will be okay.
Yeah, I was saying how many Eagles would get hurt that would make, or like how many Eagles are there that I would almost feel like the season's over if they got hurt. And I got a little scared about how high the number was. I was like Jalen, Saquon, AJ, Lane, Mailata, Carter, Quinion, Desheen. Like, I feel like if any of those guys went down, that's where I'd actually have like a meltdown. Nakobe, I love him. It's more of like I feel bad for him than I'm pretty confident Fangio is going to be able to mask.
The downgrade to Burks was huge in the game, but Burks played well in week 17 and 18 when Dean was known to be out all week. And so Burks was getting the starter reps. So I do feel hopeful that with a week of starter reps and practice, he can step up and play better than he did.
Yeah, no, and I mean, what did the guy have like 140 tackles this year? Nobody was higher on Nakobe Dean than me. Go back and look at our draft rankings. I was like, had him as like a top 10 player that year. I was obsessed with Nakobe Dean. We got him like the 4th round or whatever it was. So I love Nakobe. I'm so happy he's turned into what he's turned into. I really hope he's able to get healthy. I almost think that losing either of those safeties or Sweat would have been a bigger deal because of the replacement. And like you said, I do think we've seen flashes from Burks. And I think Fangio will be able to hide that even a little bit more than he would worried. I'd be worried about him hiding something in the secondary necessarily, or trying to hide what I think is already a shallow edge rushing kind of situation. But it's a dumb conversation to be ranking how important guys are.
That sounds like a preseason conversation.
It's a dumb conversation. It's literally just overthinking things during the playoffs. But
it's one of those things that Eagles fans get hyper fixated on their team, and you're going to look at a defense with 10 of 11 starters healthy now instead of 11 out of 11, and it sucks. But there's a lot worse places to be injury wise in the NFL right now.
I did see some guys from the Rams limped off tonight. I don't know if they were. I don't have the sound on. We're doing this podcast, and I don't really even know who got hurt. But there were definitely some guys on the Rams who limped off tonight and looked like they got banged up. It's just going to happen this time of year.
Cameron says he was wearing his jersey when it happened, and I never wear jerseys watching games at home. I blame myself. Cameron's sharing a little bit of my jersey curse because the first jersey I ever ordered was the Carson Wentz jersey after the 2019 season, and that went well. And then I got a Jason Kelce jersey last year, and he retired, which we all knew that was coming. So don't blame me for that one. I got the Brandon Graham jersey this year. I got it in the mail. I ordered it and I got it in the mail the day after his season-ending injury. So I will be buying a Matthew Stafford jersey tonight just to make sure the Eagles win next week. But let's keep rolling on here before we end up spending an hour on the Eagles game. And let's get into the Washington-Tampa Bay game. Washington wins 23-20. And Jaden Daniels leads the game-winning field goal drive in the 4th quarter, which, by the way, the chip shot off the uprights, I thought that was going to fall out. But Daniels was really good in this game, threw for 268 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also rushed for 36 yards, which was actually the leading rusher for Washington. They could not run the ball. He became the first rookie to lead his team in both passing and rushing in a playoff game in NFL history. And this was such a good game. It was back and forth. Late in the game, Baker Mayfield fumbles the ball after the defense got a stop at the goal line. And the Bucs led 17-13 in the 4th quarter at the time. Mayfield fumbles. Washington scores 4 plays later on a 4th down to take the lead. And Washington controlled the ball well at times in this game, despite their inability to run. I mean, they had a 17-play, 92-yard drive in the first and second quarter that took 9 minutes off the clock. Washington was aggressive. They went for it on 5 4th downs, which is impressive because they failed a 4th and 2 on their opening drive. And they failed to score from 1st and goal at the 1 before the Mayfield fumble. And then they turned right around and went for it on a 4th and 2 from the 5 and got the touchdown. Overall, they were 3 of 5 on 4th downs. I was impressed with Jaden Daniels. I was impressed with their commitment to staying aggressive. And they win and move on to the divisional round. So what were your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, Todd Bowles' clock management was insane at both ends of both halves. I thought the end of the first half was way worse even than how he handled the end of the game. Didn't end up mattering because they scored a touchdown anyway. But yeah, I saw Dan's comment there. That was insane management from Todd Bowles. But yeah, this was always going to be a toss-up. This kind of saved the weekend. Otherwise, all 5 games have been terrible and not very interesting. This was great ball watching this last night. It was really fun, back and forth. And Mike Evans, Lattimore, you got that classic storyline where Evans cooked him. It wasn't enough, obviously, but it was really impressive. Kind of, I'd say more than anything, coaching from Washington. I think I was pretty negative when they hired Dan Quinn about it. I was all year long maybe a little skeptical about how much Dan Quinn had to do with this turnaround for Washington, or how much of it was just how transformative of a player Jaden Daniels is and how many good moves that I think Washington made this offseason. But man, you watch that game and Dan Quinn coached like he wanted to win it. Dan Quinn was so aggressive. And I thought that he went for, I don't have the exact situation right in front of me, but I think it would have been 17-13 and they were on the 3-yard line.
It was 17-13, 4th and 2 at the 5-yard line.
And they went for it and didn't get it, right?
Oh, no. They went
before that.
Yeah, I think they had a 1st and goal at the 1. I think it ended up a 4th and goal at the 3 that they went for and didn't get it.
And they didn't get it, but what happened right after that? As Tampa Bay is having to put together a 97-yard drive to go the length of the field, they fumble a snap or fumble a handoff to Jalen McMillan, and Baker fumbles the ball. And where does he fumble it? On like the 20-yard line. So you're getting the ball right there, and then they go in 4th and 2 on basically the same situation, kind of like 4th and goal on the 3, 4th and 2 on the 3. And that time it pays off going for it again. And we killed guys like Brandon Staley. We have killed Nick Sirianni. When their ideology seems to change, drive to drive, quarter to quarter, game to game, Dan Quinn seems to have fully committed to this kind of new ideology this wasn't the Dan Quinn of the Atlanta Falcons days. So he's adjusted with the times, and I think you got to give him a ton of credit for how aggressive he's been all year long on 4th down. And go for 2 situations and things like that. So good for Dan Quinn, good for Washington. I think it's a pretty brutal matchup for them next week.
Yeah, let's somebody asked about, do you think there's a chance they upset the Lions? And we'll get to that. We're going to get to preview here in a minute. But before we do, we can talk real briefly about this one because it just happened and it was a total disaster. But the Rams just destroyed the Vikings. And to me, I mean, the storyline on this game is how much money Sam Darnold lost in the last 2 weeks. I never bought into he's making it a difficult decision for them. You don't trade up for a rookie quarterback and then be like, we never got to see that guy play because he got hurt. But this guy that's been really bad his whole career had a good season. Maybe we should hitch our wagons to him. And the Lions broke Sam Darnold last week. And the Rams picked up right where the Lions left off. And I think he ended up taking 8 sacks. I don't have the box score in front of me. I obviously stopped watching in the 4th quarter when we hit record, but just total domination from a Rams team that I mentioned it earlier with the Stafford Love comparison. When Stafford gets hot, he's nearly impossible to stop. And he started this game hot. And he slowed down a little bit down the stretch. But again, when you're up like they were up, you don't need to continue to play at that level. You just burn the clock and get out of there. So thoughts on the Vikings and where they go moving forward and on this game as a whole?
Yeah, I think it's obvious. I think it was like week 9 or week 10 that on Sunday Night Football, Collinsworth said, like, yeah, Mike, they told me that they're still going with JJ. And everyone went up in arms about it. And they're like, how could you say that? They're 8-1. And I think it was the right decision then. And I think it would be the right decision now. And I think the Vikings started changing their tune a little bit to the media about it. They're like, oh, we'll see what happens when we get there, kind of. I don't think the tune ever changed. I think
if they were legitimately thinking about paying Sam Darnold, this is the best thing that could have happened to them as a franchise.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I could not agree more. And I think there's a lot of people out there saying like, the Rams looked so good tonight that you have to be worried about it for the Eagles. I think this was a Vikings team in free fall mode. I think we saw it against Detroit. I think you see it this week. I'm not worried about the Rams. I wouldn't have been worried about the Vikings. I don't think this could have worked out better for the Eagles. I know that they look good tonight. That offense had a lot of problems before this game. And I don't know if that offense was great tonight or if the defense was so good that the offense benefited from it. I think there's probably a little bit of both. So I think we see the line 6.5. I don't know if I'm going to bet that line, but I'm going to be hammering a Chiefs-Eagles teaser for sure.
Yeah, you know who is a top 10 quarterback in the NFL against the Blitz? Matthew Stafford. You know the only thing the Vikings defense does? Blitz. So I think it was a bad matchup for the Vikings coming off of a game where they just got embarrassed, lost out on a potential 1 seed. And I mean, Darnold was seeing ghosts. Brian Flores doesn't know how to adjust if he can't blitz all the time. And I love Flores, but if you got to have a counterpunch when that's not working. And they just continued to blitz Stafford. And I know at one point they said Stafford was like 14 of 17 against the blitz or something like that. I'm not sure what it ended up as, but the Vikings may have just been saved from themselves from making a New York Giants decision to pay a Daniel Jones after a playoff run. So hopefully they're, and I do feel bad for Vikings fans. It was a fun season for them along the way, and it's got to suck to go out like that on a playoff game. But I do think Kevin O'Connell's really good, and if they hit on J.J. McCarthy, this team's going to be really good for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a J.J. McCarthy guy. I don't think you were either.
I wasn't either, but
in the draft process. But
he's better than Sam Darnold, in my opinion.
I probably agree with that. And looking at what Kevin O'Connell just did with Sam Darnold, how could you think that JJ's not going to look at least serviceable there with Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson, and I think a top 5 offensive play caller in KOC.
Yeah, a comment coming in here from Pray For Me saying that Stafford was thinking this defense is cute. He's not one of these new gen quarterbacks that doesn't know how to beat that. And I was going to try to look up what he was 13 of 19 against the blitz for 179 yards and 2 touchdowns. When he wasn't blitzed on 9 dropbacks, Stafford wasn't blitzed. He had 30 passing yards. So I don't know, that maybe you don't blitz Stafford all the time. You know who doesn't blitz Stafford, by the way? Cameron chimes in. You know who doesn't blitz is Vic Fangio.
He doesn't believe that exists as a concept. Blitzing.
Yeah.
No, but Fangio owns Sean McVay. I'm sure we can dive into, maybe that's a fun, I'll give Shane a homework assignment to tweet it out. Go, Shane. Go do a Twitter thread about Fangio versus McVay, all the times it's happened, because someone ran it down earlier this year. Jordan Rodriguez, good Rams follow, ran down kind of how like Vic Fangio made Sean McVay question everything about what he knew about football, like back when he had Jared Goff. And he like completely he basically like went on a soul-searching mission in the offseason to like try to re-find his love for the game of football because McFangio like took it from him. So like it hasn't really gotten better, even like with the changes McVay's made in the Stafford era. Like it's an interesting. I might try to go back and try to find that clip to send it to Shane, but I think she went down the list of games Fangio's played against McVay, and even some of the games McVay's played against Fangio, like disciples that kind of run the same thing, and it's not pretty.
Yeah. So, all right, let's get into preview games. We'll be a little quicker here, but there's 4 divisional round matchups to preview for next week. And again, we'll just go in order here. We'll kick off with Houston versus Kansas City at 4:30 on Saturday. The Chiefs are favored by 8 in this game, and this is a rematch of a Week 16 game that the Chiefs won 27-19. They last met in the playoffs in 2019 in the Wildcard Round, with the Chiefs coming back from a 24-0 deficit to win 51-31 on their way to a Super Bowl win. I do not remember that game at all until I was looking up stuff for this, but that sounds like a wild game. Patrick Mahomes is 6-0 in the divisional round, which is the most wins without a loss in any playoff round in NFL history. And so the Texans' pathway to win this game, I feel like, is for rust to be an issue with the Chiefs. They didn't play starters in Week 18, and then they had a bye. And the Texans' pass rush is top-notch, but Mahomes is so good at avoiding sacks. And even if they win that matchup as well as you can win a matchup against Patrick Mahomes, the Texans offense has just been bad. Like since Week 9, they're 28th in EPA per play. And this Chiefs defense is really good. And so like if you're the Texans, it feels like your pathway to victory is a defensive struggle, but then it's basically impossible to beat the Chiefs in a 1-score game. So Houston has a chance to do one of the funniest things ever if they knock off KC. I just don't see it happening. And I know you don't either, because you're going to drop your stat about Patrick Mahomes and how he always makes the conference championship game. And it's the floor if you have Patrick Mahomes, and I'll let you do your whole thing here, but go ahead.
No, I wasn't even going to do that. What I was going to do is, and why I might have seemed distracted over the last 5 minutes, I was, maybe moving some money around to place the biggest bet of the year that I've placed so far on a little teaser. They call them teaser in the biz, Shane. 6-point teaser. Chiefs are -7.5 on DraftKings. Eagles are -6 on DraftKings, 6.5 elsewhere. Little 6-point teaser brings that to Chiefs -1.5, Eagles even money, just money line to win the game. And that's -120, that little teaser on DraftKings. And that's the biggest bet that I've placed all year long on an NFL game. Or on, I shouldn't say, I think I've bet more on Jalen Hurts touchdown, but on a non-Jalen Hurts touchdown bet, my biggest bet of the year. So that should tell you a little bit of what I think about Houston. And I said it earlier, I didn't walk out of that Chargers game. I thought the story of that game was the Chargers puking all over themselves, not the Texans forcing them. If we're talking about whose hand went down the Chargers' throat to make them puke on themselves, I think it was their own hand. I don't think it was Houston sticking their hand down. Is that a good analogy?
It's kind of a gross analogy, but we can roll with it.
Yeah, it's definitely gross.
So, okay. Well, let's keep rolling then. Let's go to the other Saturday game. We've got Washington at Detroit. This is the 8:00 game. Detroit is favored by 8.5. The last time these two teams met in the postseason, Mark, was 2000, which was before Jaden Daniels was born. This will be the 6th time a rookie quarterback has faced the team with the best record in the NFL. Okay. I'm making you guess this time. 6 times a rookie quarterback has faced the team with the best record in the NFL. Only one of the previous 5 won. It was not RG3.
I know that.
Who was it?
A rookie quarter, Ben Roethlisberger?
It was not Ben Roethlisberger.
Rookie that won a game in the Tom Brady?
No, more recent than that. 2008. Joe Flacco.
Okay. All right. I wouldn't have gotten that.
You won't get this either, but who was the team with the best record that he beat?
Was it Denver?
It was the 13-3 Tennessee Titans.
Wow.
How the mighty have fallen.
Not a chance I would have gotten that.
Yeah. My hot take, it's not a hot take. My prediction for this game is there might be 0 punts, considering Dan Campbell and Dan Quinn and how aggressive these guys are. But David Montgomery is expected to be back for the Lions. Kevin Zeitler and Terrion Arnold are uncertain at this point in time as we record Monday night. The Lions offense is largely healthy and rested. They should be able to dominate the Commanders defense. The question for me is on the other side. Can Jaden Daniels pull off magic against a beat up Lions defense? The Lions blitzed Minnesota on 56% of their dropbacks in week 18, but Jaden Daniels has been very good against the blitz. It opens up his scrambles. It opens up deep balls. That was their response to more injuries, how to generate pressure. I said all along, I thought the only team outside of Eagles or Packers that had a chance to beat the Lions was the Commanders. And I don't think it's a great chance. I just think we've seen that the Vikings can't do it. I don't believe the Rams could do it. And I don't think Tampa Bay could do it. But you look at Washington, and if it turns into a shootout, because I don't expect them to get stops on defense, but, is it unbelievable that Jaden Daniels against their banged up defense could throw for 300 yards and rush for another 75 yards and, win in a shootout? I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. So I will be picking the Lions. I think I would probably take the Commanders and the points at 8.5. That's a huge spread, but I think the Lions will win, but it wouldn't totally shock me if Washington is able to pull it out.
You can even find 9.5 out there. And I was staring at it today, and sorry to turn this into a little gambling session, but I think all of these games are really interesting from a gambling perspective this week. I was kind of staring at the Commanders plus 9.5, and I do think they're going to keep it close. But more importantly, I think they're going to score with Detroit. Like, I think this is a team that will be able to score. They didn't punt last week. Dan Quinn's aggression on fourth down only is going to help in terms of their point total. So my question to you, Shane, is why would I bet plus 9.5 when I can bet the Commanders team total over 22.5? Is there any chance the Commanders cover a 9.5 point spread if they don't score 23?
No. I mean, like Goff 5 interception game somehow aside, no.
I don't think this is a 24-21, 27-21 game. Like, if they only scored 21 points, I think they're losing by double digits.
The Lions are putting up 30. If the Commanders are going to keep it a game, they're going to have to put up 25 or 32.
I agree. That's kind of where I agree. So I think if you're going to, and I think a lot of people out there are looking at it and going, so many points. And I don't disagree with them. I'm not as high on the Lions as Vegas and a lot of the consensus out there is. So I totally get it. But I think if you're going to bet it, I don't think you want to bet on the Commanders' defense. I think you want to bet on the offense. I think you want to bet Commanders' team total over. And you can root for the Commanders to win the game, root for them to keep it close. But I think you're in business no matter what happens betting that team total over. Because if Detroit goes out and puts up 45, it's just going to help Washington put up points in crunch time. And I think that team total over is just a genuinely better bet than betting the 9.5 or whatever the number ends up at.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what is the percent chance, in your opinion, that Washington can pull an upset here?
Let's look at, I want to use my calculator. Plus 4, they're plus 420. Plus 420 implied odds here. I'm curious what that gives me percentage-wise. Sorry for the great radio here. It's late. My brain doesn't work that well. About 19%, 19.23% is what Vegas is giving Washington a chance at. I'd say it's a little higher. I'd say it's
I was going to say like a 25% chance.
25-30% chance. Yeah, that's what I'll go with.
All right. Well, let's keep rolling then. Anything else you want to say on that game before we move on?
Jaden, get ready to run like hell.
All right.
100
Cameron
plus
says
yards, how they win that game. Jaden runs for 100 plus yards.
Cameron says he gives them a 33% chance to pull the upset.
I like it.
All right. Let's get into the Eagles Rams game. So the Eagles will have a day rest advantage over the Rams, obviously, because they played Monday night. Eagles played yesterday. Rams will have to travel cross country, play in Philadelphia, play outdoors. I know that used to be a big storyline for Stafford, playing outdoors in the cold. I don't know that that's still a thing, but you mentioned earlier the whole thing, like the Vic Fangio defense basically was like kind of designed to deal with all of the under center play action type of stuff that LaFleur, that Shanahan, that McVay run. And it's been very successful over the years. To me, and I know to you too, this was the ideal matchup for the Eagles in the second round of the playoffs, because if you played against the Vikings or against the Buccaneers, you were going to be dealing with exotic blitz packages, and that can be problematic for the Eagles. You look at the Rams. I don't think their defense is that scary. The offense is certainly scary if Stafford gets hot, and they've got two really good receivers, and they've got a good run game, and they've got a good quarterback. But at the end of the day, I trust the Eagles defense more than I trust their offense right now. And so I would rather play the team that the offense is a little more scary. I think the Eagles match up pretty favorably with the Rams. And let's not forget the Eagles beat them earlier this season. I think it was 37-20. Was that right? I can't remember. I think it was 37-20, and they got a garbage time touchdown. It was not a close football game. Now, that was not a good game for the Rams, and they've been a much better team since then. Obviously, they started 1-4. They went 9-3 down the stretch. But what are your thoughts on the Eagles matchup with the Rams?
Yeah, I mean, they won that game by 17. Everybody's yelling and screaming about Jalen Hurts in the passing game. They had 179 passing yards in that game. They only threw 22 passes in that game. In a game, they scored 37 and won by 17. Saquon rushed for 255 yards against them. 10 yards per carry. I don't think that they've completely fixed their defense into being some elite defense because they've played Sam Darnold and a failing Kyler Murray and Seattle and the dead 49ers. Like, I think that Rams defense is still gettable. I don't think a team that gave up 255 yards on the ground to Saquon like 6 weeks ago is all of a sudden some scary defense I need to be worried about. I couldn't be happier about the matchup. I just sent Shane a podcast I'm going to listen to once I get off this from Jordan Rodriguez from her. I think it's called The Play Callers. And I think it's a whole episode about McVay and Fangio and kind of their history against each other. So I'm interested to check that out. And that was part of the reason I think I brought that up last week when we talked about what matchup I wanted most. And it was the Rams because of McVay, going to bed at night and checking under his bed for Vic Fangio. And I think that's the truth. I think he pretty much exposed his play action scheme with Jared Goff in 2018 to a point where McVay could never recover. And I'm sure he's going to expose whatever new wrinkle that McVay has kind of built in. I will say that it opened 6.5. It is being bet down. It's at 6, even 5.5 on some sites. So it does seem like there's some public love for the Rams. That's not that uncommon. They played tonight, whereas the Eagles played yesterday. Recency bias. People kind of remember the last thing they see. So I wouldn't worry too much in general about where a line moves. I would kind of look at where it opens, which is what I was saying last week when the Packers were 3.5. Jumped to 5.5. That was because people bet it. Those people were correct, but the real line here is 6.5. That's where the odds makers opened it.
Yeah, the Rams ranked 25th in pass defense DVOA and 21st in rush defense DVOA.
Someone told me they were 17th overall coming into today.
It might be over. Oh, I can look up the overall. I have it split by offense and defense. So they're overall, they are, where'd it go? Total DVOA, they are 17th. Yeah, 17th overall, 10th offensively, 26th defensively.
Yeah, I had a buddy who was afraid of the Vikings, and I was kind of telling him, like, whoever wins this game, I'm not afraid of them. But he was like, well, it is like, since he was kind of using my thing against me because he's like, you can't tell me how good the Packers are using DVOA and then tell me that there's no difference between the Vikings being the 7th DVOA team and the Rams being 17th. And I was like, you know what? That's fair. That's fair. You might have cooked. But then the Rams go out and kill the Vikings, and it makes it feel like who was the better team? Who knows? But this was the matchup I wanted beforehand. So feed me the soft California LA Rams flying from Arizona back to LA over to Philadelphia to play in 30-degree weather when they usually play in a dome, and played in a dome tonight. I couldn't be happier.
Sunshine.
Yeah, last week when they played Green Bay, I remember it came out on the weekend that it was actually not going to be quite as cold during game time as they thought. And I was kind of like, well, that doesn't matter. It's Green Bay. And then I thought about it and I was like, well, next week against the Rams or Tampa, that matters. Like, let's get some snow in the forecast.
Yeah,
let's get some freezing rain going this week.
Let's get sub-zero wind chills with snow falling. That'd be great.
I think I read that it's only supposed to be like 30, 35, like just like normal cold. But it would be awesome if something turned a little and we got some snowy conditions or some rough conditions.
Snow Bowl 2.0. So
I would love it.
Okay, let's get on to the last game of the year so far. Baltimore at Buffalo at 6:30 on Sunday. The Bills are favored by a point right now. And this is a rematch of a week 4 game that Baltimore won 35-10, which is kind of crazy when you think about it. Baltimore won the regular season matchup by 25, and they're the underdog in this game. Their last playoff.
Well, hey, wait, Shane, Emmanuel Acho told me on his show, man, it's a shame that these two just don't face off this year. It would really help decide the MVP debate.
Yeah. Well, first of all, don't watch his show.
I don't. You think I watched that live? That was a clip.
I don't. I don't. But yeah, the last playoff matchup between these two teams was in 2020 in the divisional round. Buffalo won 17-3. Both teams in this game averaged 30 points a game. This is only the 7th postseason matchup in NFL history between two teams averaging 30 points a game. So this game could be a shootout. Lamar has had a tendency to start hot in playoffs. In his last 3 playoff appearances, in the first playoff game he played, he had a 70% completion percentage with 4 touchdowns to 1 interception. In the follow-up games, that dropped to a 56% completion percentage with a 1-2 touchdown to interception ratio. So we'll see if Lamar can stack back-to-back good performances because he was dominant against the Steelers. Zay Flowers' status is still in question as we record on Monday. The Bills' defense hasn't been great, but it is better against the run. It's 8th in EPA per rush versus the pass, which is 20th. But they do struggle against scrambles. That's been a struggle for them all year. I don't know how you stop Lamar and Derrick Henry. Like, I don't know how you stop the Ravens' offense, to be honest. And I think Josh Allen's just going to have to go nuclear, as he's done multiple times this season. I think this is just going to be a fantastic game.
Scoring margin against playoff teams this year, Shane. The Buffalo Bills were 5th in the NFL at +9. Second place in the NFL was the Detroit Lions at +36. First place was the Baltimore Ravens at +126. They played 11 games against playoff teams this season, Baltimore. The DVOA has them as the 7th best team of all time. And part of that is because they lost 5 games this year by a total of 22 points combined. Justin Tucker missed 22 points of kicks combined in those 5 losses. So when you put it that way, when you look at the fact that they've had to play Kansas City, they've had to play Buffalo, they've had to play Philadelphia, they've had to play Tampa Bay, they've had to play so many of the top teams in the NFL this year, not to mention Pittsburgh twice, not to mention Cincinnati twice. They really have had such a brutal schedule. I think they're the battle-tested team. Obviously, we saw what happened when they played Buffalo earlier this year, even though Emmanuel Acho didn't catch the game. I think there's a reason that the Buffalo Bills, who everybody's picking to go to the Super Bowl, go watch any of the shows before the first game of this Wildcard Weekend. Everybody's picking the Bills to go to the Super Bowl. Who's favored in Buffalo this week? The Baltimore Ravens.
Are they?
Yeah.
Okay, when I looked at it earlier, it was Bill. Where I looked, at least, it was Bills -1.
It's flipped. It's flipped
Okay,
to Ravens.
okay.
It's actually -1.5 on some sites, Ravens. But the fact that that's not Bills -2, -3, I think says a lot about a really tough place to play in Buffalo. And I don't think it's enough to matter. I think you look at the difference of what happened with Baltimore the first 10 weeks of the year when they were 29th in dropback EPA defensively. And you stop playing Kyle Hamilton at linebacker and you start playing the best safety in the NFL at safety. Crazy concept. And they're number one in dropback EPA defensively since that exact moment that they decided to make that switch. I think that's a pretty big difference. And I think if they had that defense for the first 10 weeks, I think we're singing a different tune entirely about this Ravens game. And I think this is in Baltimore instead of in Buffalo, but that's not the case. Even still, I'm really confident Baltimore is going to win this game. I'm really confident that Baltimore is going to the AFC Championship. But the problem is, Shane, Kansas City is going to get to play Houston on Saturday, get to sit around and rest for an extra day. They're probably not going to have to expend 4 quarters of energy, like knock them down, drag them out, close game. Whereas this Baltimore-Buffalo game is going to be a war. And it's going to be cold. And
we should talk about that too, because getting a bye is a big enough advantage that the NFL serves up a second-round game for 1 seeds guaranteed to be on shorter rest. And then you look at it, like Kansas City and Detroit are going to play on Saturday, right? And so then you're going to get them going against opponents in the conference championship game at a rest advantage. Once again, like the bye is a big enough advantage. The NFL really needs to take a look at how they schedule the playoffs. Your 1 seeds absolutely should not be guaranteed a rest advantage in a conference championship game just because they were the 1 seed.
And really, the only reason that they're doing this is because they want Ravens-Bills in primetime on Sunday night. Is Eagles-Rams not good enough? Is Lions America's team against Washington, D.C.'s team? The Commanders, a huge, huge brand. That's not big enough to go in primetime? Like, those are both really good games. The fact that they're throwing the entire rest advantage of both NFC and AFC championships up in the air just because they want Josh Allen and Lamar on TV on Sunday night instead of Saturday night, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, like people aren't going to watch anyways.
It's a joke.
I've said this for years. The NFL playoff schedule should be so simple. There should not be a Monday night game on Wildcard Weekend. And I don't care whichever conference you want to put, but either AFC or NFC, every round is on Saturday. So like put all the AFC wildcard games on Saturday, all the NFC wildcard games on Sunday. You get to the divisional round, AFC is Saturday, NFC is Sunday. You get to the conference championships, AFC is Saturday night, NFC is Sunday night. Then you get to the Super Bowl. Okay, yeah, 1 team has an extra day, but there's a week in between. It really doesn't matter at that point. Like it would be so simple to schedule things in a way that is fair competitively. And you can still pick your marquee game, like make Bills Ravens, make that be the Saturday night game, and make Lions Commanders be the Sunday night game. And you're going to pull tons of viewership. I really dislike how they schedule out the playoffs, and the Monday night game makes it even worse for Wild Card Weekend. But like, if you look at the Rams, if the Rams were to beat the Eagles, they would have to have played a divisional round game on short rest and then turn around and play a conference championship game on short rest again. That's just wrong.
And by the way, all of this, and everyone's going to take us bashing the 1 seed and kind of the advantage it gives you as sour grapes that we didn't get it. And also, a lot of people are going to take it as anti-KC stuff. This, more than anything, shows last year was the year to beat Kansas City in the playoffs. They had to go to Buffalo in the second round. Then they had to go to Baltimore. They're doing the Ravens path that they're going to have to do now, just reversed. And it's They did it. They went into Buffalo, beat Josh Allen. They went into Baltimore, beat Lamar Jackson. It's hard for me to. I feel like that's almost been erased by some people, but that happened last year. That's what makes it hard for me to picture either of Lamar or Josh going into Kansas City and beating them, and what I think is a better team this year than they were last year.
Yeah, Cameron chiming in that if you did that, the AFC fans wouldn't watch on Sunday and NFC fans wouldn't on Saturday. I don't think so. I mean, I think you're always going to have people that only watch their team, but people that are going to watch the games are going to watch the games.
I agree with you. I generally agree with you.
Yeah.
I guess the only argument that I will say is more about Saturday night. Some people have lives, Shane. Some people's lives don't revolve around watching
change your life
of football. I agree with you 100%.
Some people say that I should get a life. I tell them they should stop having a life.
You couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more with that, obviously. But I guess that is the only answer, is that Saturday night you get less casuals tuning in a little bit, but yeah. I agree with you. I think the NFL is doing just fine. I think to kind of protect the sanctity of the playoff, I do feel like you could sacrifice 5 million viewers here or there.
Yeah, we don't need to squeeze that last drop out of ratings. Let's ensure the integrity of the product on the field. The ratings are just fine.
Yeah. No. And by the way, the comment, you take that back, man. Football is life. Well, I'm sitting here at midnight.
Yeah.
It's life for me to an uncomfortable degree.
I think what we're arguing is that football is life. And so others might say we should get a life. And I would say to that they just need to discover football.
I don't disagree. I don't.
All right. Well, that's going to about do it. Mark, do you got any final thoughts before we get out of here and go to bed at midnight?
Just wrapping up my bets from the 4 games. Commanders team total over 22.5. The Chiefs Eagles 6-point teaser. That Chiefs -1.5. Eagles pick them, and then give me the Ravens on the money line.
Cameron says it's the NFL. They're going to squeeze that orange as much as they can. Hey, you can squeeze the orange all you want. Just don't get any pulp in my juice. That's all I'm saying.
Who wins a flag football coaching matchup, Shane or Mark? Shane. 100% Shane. I'd get more frustrated with the kids. I couldn't coach them. Shane, I think Shane would be better.
I may or may not have coached a flag football team in college, and also may or may not have played on a Nationals flag football team in college. But
there you go. I think I'd have some offensive vision. I think I could cook as an OC. I think my defensive game plan would fall apart. I'd be blitzing. I'd be the anti-Fangio.
Hey, maybe it'd work. You never know. We'll swap. I can tell some flag football stories sometime, but not at midnight. So that's going to do it for this episode number 185 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, if you want to hear some flag football stories, smash that subscribe button, turn on notifications so you don't miss our next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating wherever you stream your podcasts, at the Eagles Pinpool Network, Apple, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you want to get it. We could use your ratings and help getting it out there to more people. You can follow us on Twitter. We'll be live next week at our normal time, I think, Monday morning-ish, afternoon-ish, because there's no Monday night game. We're only breaking down.
There is a Monday night game that night, Shane.
Well, not a Monday night NFL game, just some silly college game that Mark cares about. So maybe there's only 4 games to recap. Maybe we can swap flag football war stories then, although if I know us, we'll spend way too long talking about those games as well. But you'll never know if you don't tune in. So follow us on Twitter. I'm at Shane Half NFL. He is at Mark Henry Jr., and we will catch you guys next time.